and welcome to another episode of Paranormal NL, a place where you can share paranormal experiences for people in Newfoundland and Labrador and anywhere in the world. Today I have with me Sasha Kearley, and she's from Newfoundland, and she has a paranormal experience or some information also that she'd like to share with us about UFOs here in our own province of Newfoundland and Labrador, about Project Blue Book. Hello, Sasha. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thanks for being here today. So, tell us some information that you have about Project Blue Book in Newfoundland. I had no idea that that was even a thing here.
Yeah, I found it really interesting because when I first became interested in UFOs, I would deep dive, the different projects, but I never expected to find Newfoundland to have such an incredibly tight tie to the American government's projects. The reason why Newfoundland and Labrador are mentioned and are part of these projects, like Project Blue Book for sure, but preceding that was Project Sign and Project Grudge. But in Project Blue Book, Newfoundland and Labrador come up because we have had American military bases. So every place in the world that has an American military base, are part of Project Blue Book as well, because wherever there's a sighting, the nearest American base, would be referred that sighting. So as you can imagine, Newfoundland and Labrador actually have quite a few in Project Blue Book since, as you know, we're very, very active hotspot for UFOs. So out of about 12,738 sightings for the Project Blue Book, we account for about 46 of the 701 unknowns. So 701 unknowns are truly, they could not debunk it, because actually Project Blue Book was sort of a farce. Their thing was to keep it to a minimum. They wanted the unknowns to be as bare minimum as possible, because of course they don't want to have to then deal with public knowledge or explaining that further to the public. So 15% is what we account for, and that's a lot when you consider the fact that it is for every American Air Force base all over the states, all over Canada, even in Japan, and we have a really, really high number of unknowns here.
15%. So wow, that's a huge number of unknowns.
Yeah, and there was actually I live in Katy Village, and I'm right by East White Hills, and that is one of the best hotspots in St. John's that I know of, and also Southside Hills. But Fort Pepperell, the military base, used to be here. And there was actually one incident where they caught two separate radars caught a UFO going over the East White Hills, going at 3,000 kilometers an hour.
Wow, that's a huge thing. Now, did any of this cross over into MUFON? Were you able to look and see if they accounted for that?
Well, the thing is that a lot of things that are in Project Blue Book aren't in MUFON. Although MUFON was created in 1960, it's not affiliated with the government. But we have about 180 reports on MUFON from Newfoundland, but that is just the tip of the iceberg, because not many people even know. They can report to MUFON that they've seen something, or they'll see something and think, just a weird shooting star, or that was a weird, a plane or something. So it's hard enough to even have people realize that it is a UFO, or that it is reportable. But I've done a lot of my own research that both neither MUFON or Project Blue Book has recorded through the years. So I have a few diaries there. Maybe I can pull out at some time and send you some information about that. But it's really quite incredible how active this province is, and same with Labrador as well. Labrador is also in Project Blue Book. Goose Bay Air Force Base, they have a really good radar system up there, and the thing that they're developing, I think there's like 100 million, I think, now going into a new radar system up in Goose Bay. So, they're seeing it up there too.
Now, I don't know if a lot of listeners know, but Newfoundland is also related to or has a juncture for NASA to use. So when they traject different things into space, we have a satellite comm that they can use here, and they did use it and did mention it several times during different launches.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's so interesting. So
yes.
It's like a beacon of some sort?
Yes, that they can use to there's only certain signals that will reach that far up in the stratosphere. So we have one of those here in Newfoundland.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, there's so much here. Like, I think that we're very underestimated in terms of in ufology. I think that we're like a little hidden gem.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. For some of the things that you investigated or experienced or saw, can you share some of those things?
Yeah, I can. I have to respect the privacy of the person, of the people that have told the information. But
absolutely,
one person, we essentially had our own Phoenix Lights. So this is really cool, and this was a personal story. This wasn't at first shared with MUFON. It was someone that personally told me about their experience because they weren't comfortable sharing it on a group. And her and her family saw 7 huge burning flames, like flame balls, I guess you'd call them, fireballs, and they were over the mountains. There were 7 of them. They were just still, and then one by one they went off, and a really incredible experience. And she's a very credible witness. Like, she's very well spoken, and it was a bunch of them. It wasn't just her. 7 different people saw it with her whole family. And like, things like that happen so frequently, but it just takes someone to see them. Like, you have to see it, for anyone to know that it has happened. And I think that there's just so much that's happened that people have seen that they just haven't shared. So I think doing things like this, like what you're doing, kind of bringing out the stories, it's really cool.
So, Sasha, what would you say to the naysayers who say, oh, that's just a satellite, that's just SpaceX, they have their Starlink satellites up there, and also the U.S. does have a military branch, and it is the Space Force. Yes, it sounds sci-fi, but it does exist.
Well, I would say first that satellites do not do any maneuvers. They will go in a straight line path. Starlink is very obviously Starlink because it's a bunch all in a row. So, but in terms of technology being like, maybe some black budget technology from the US, that is possible that some of those things are, but that's reverse engineering probably from downed crafts, because we know that they have done that. But in the 50s, they could get away with saying that UFOs were, probably Russian tech, or it's China, or it's whoever their enemies were. Maybe it's them. But the thing is that at this point we would have caught up to that technology, so it's not another country. It's these things are absolutely they defy physics, and we don't understand how to generate our own gravity field yet. So these things are definitely, I believe, like, if I can just say my personal theory on what or who they are, I believe that they live in our oceans. That's why, the coastlines are so important, and that's why they're so prominent in Newfoundland and California along those coasts, because they live in our oceans. So, yeah.
Well, there has been some, a real concrete evidence that has been released. Of course, the Tic Tac video and the Gimbit video of USOs, unidentified submerged objects, if for people who don't know what a USO is. And, a lot of people have said, well, maybe we are doing some reverse engineering. I don't know if you've ever heard of the branch black box DARPA of the military. Have you ever heard of them?
I'm not sure that I have.
Yeah, they do a lot of technology type of things that's worth looking into. And
I
then
remember.
you remember.
Oh, I remember. Like, I'm not sure if you've heard of. Oh my goodness, what's his name? Shoot. He's very popular, but my brain is just gone cuckoo right now.
Are you talking about Travis Taylor?
S4. He worked at S4 in Area 51.
Oh yes, the guy with the glasses. I know who you're talking about.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So he was talking about how when they were doing reverse engineering there, and when they cut into the UFO, it exploded and it killed like a bunch of people, because they try to cut into the metal.
It's interesting that you talk about that metal, because I mentioned in another episode with another person who was on the show. We talked a little bit or touched on Skinwalker Ranch, or another one called Blind Frog Ranch, which is very near Skinwalker. And there's another one called Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, where they have these different instrumental things going on. And there is some metal, mysterious type of metal that is in this mesa, which is a mountain over near Utah. And in addition to that, I don't know if you ever heard of the other Roswell, which is happened in Lubbock, Texas. And I have another person who may come on the podcast and explain a little bit more of that. And there's actually a book out about it. His name is Nori Torres. He wrote some good information about that topic too.
There's something very interesting about Roswell that has a connection to Newfoundland. Actually, a little bit of a hidden key to the mystery of Roswell is that there is microfilm that is yet to be discovered. I'm on the hunt for it. I already have a couple of leads, and I do have one little bit of information confirming this. But there was a crash here in Harmon Airport Field Air Force Base in Newfoundland 3 days prior to the July 1947 Roswell crash. And they believe that this has great significance. The information that can be gathered from this will be able to, link the two incidences. So that's pretty interesting to me, and that's had me excited now for a couple of years. I've been searching for and found some information about it. So yeah, it's all in the old military files. You really gotta go through a lot of dry stuff to get to oh, hey, wait a minute, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And you find it, you gotta take the time. And I have a lot of time on my hands because this is pretty much just what I do.
Sasha, was this the Project Sign and Project Grudge that you were talking about? Can you speak a little bit more on those topics?
On those two, I'm not as knowledgeable, I will admit. For me, Project Blue Book, because, I'm not too familiar with them, because the reason why Project Blue Book was important to me was because I discovered its connection to Newfoundland. And I haven't really found or really searched long enough for the sightings, the listing of sightings for those two projects. And I'm not sure if they're... the reason why they did those projects were for the same reasons, because pretty much for Project Blue Book, is it a threat to national security? Is there technology that we can gain from recovering these crafts, or can we advance our technology?
It's interesting you talk about technology. You see all these shows about ancient aliens and how people think that there were aircraft in ancient times, such as in India. I don't know if you ever heard of what's called a Vimana. They actually have in their ancient texts how to build a Vimana, and it's basically an aircraft. And there are some other things. Some people think, oh, that's really weird, but it is kind of interesting, because I wonder, did they have ancient technology? It just makes you wonder.
Oh, for sure. I feel like we are very far from the first civilization on Earth to rise and to eventually fall. I believe our empire is falling now, but I believe that there's been so many. I mean, even like Cleopatra was closer to the age of smartphones than she was to ancient Egypt, and ancient Egyptians studied ancient Egyptian, and like so it goes so far back, and everything gets destroyed over thousands of years after they disappear for whatever reason. But I believe that technology plays a big part into why we do disappear. Like we use things for the wrong reason, or I feel that our civilization unfortunately has gone that way in terms of nuclear war. I feel like we're on the precipice of World War III. So I really do believe that there's the stuff that is out there that cannot be explained by there's no way that just people with no technology could build these massive these monoliths and have batteries inside of pyramids and like things of that nature. Like you said, that I didn't know about this blueprint for making what was it that you that it's called?
Vimana, Vimana. I do believe that's how it's spelled. But they're out of India, and it is in their books. And several cultures, especially some of the ones over by the Mesa, the Utes and other people, they talk about the star beings and star gods and things like that. But then there's people who say, well, that technology you see, that's our tech. Just like we keep a lot of the other things like the stealth bomber and things like that, that was all hidden for a long time until finally we said, yeah, that's ours, we did it. Because there are what we call UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, I'm wondering, is the military just coining that term and putting things out there, trying to skew the opposite side of the world into thinking that we don't have the tech, when actually we do have the tech, because there are some other technologies that we do have in relation to invisibility. That is a thing that is possible, and DARPA, if you go on there, they do have some examples of that.
Well, it's so interesting because did you know that even Disney was part of making sort of so the military hired like mass media, so like celebrities, even Disney, to make a mockery of in like the mid 50s during Project Blue Book, like I think it was 52, after they, or 53 I think, after they had downgraded the amount of members to like less than 10, like from I think it was above 10, and then I think it was just 2 people at one point, and they actually hired like the military hired people to make this into little green men, or make it into some sort of joke, which is what we pretty much still see today. The thing that's changing a bit more now, but
that's what a lot of people think about. When you talk about the word UFO, people think about little green men and things like that, but there's a lot of other folks who talk about in Close Encounters, third kind, and SETI and things like that. But coming back all the way full circle to Newfoundland, I mean, it is interesting that we did have a military base here. It was an American military base, and there are people who have had sightings. Have you talked to any of these people or seen any of their footage?
I have for both of those things. I have seen, and I've read, and I've witnessed. I've witnessed hundreds, like easily, like that's hundreds of events. What they are, what I have mostly seen, is what seems to be random sequence flashing in the sky. Now, I don't know if there might be something more to it, some sort of, maybe it's a message in like, some sort of code. I'm not sure. I've had someone suggest that recently, and it interested me, but basically just sequenced flashing, and very fast. It's not ice crystals, it's not this or that. It's very, it's pretty close, and they're very fast, and it can be between 2 flashes to just under a minute that they'll last, and that's all happened in the East White Hills. Excuse me. I've seen 3 lights go into water, into the ocean. So on the subject of USOs, you mentioned that earlier. Me and Linda Refuse, actually, of MUFON, we are the USO girls. So we haven't had a report of a USO since we were put into that position, but I'm excited for our first one. Hopefully that comes along soon. But yeah, I've talked to so many people. Like I was part of, or I am part of the group Haunted and Spooky NL, which is run by Libby. She does an excellent job. It's a really great group. And I've written, I was like, hey, if anyone wants to share their story with me, and like they're not really comfortable with like a bunch of people reading it, just shoot me a message. And I can't even tell you how many people have come forward and told me their experiences, and the ones that they've experienced are just like, oh hey, I saw something go really fast. Like these are incredibly like interesting, like really big deal type of things, and yeah, it's just really really cool to know all the things that have been going around the province that I haven't seen, or that like I even had one guy who had this sighting in 1974 and only reported it in May, and it was the Bell Island boom. He saw a cigar-shaped craft, or like out of the corner of his eye. He was driving down through Carbonear, and he saw a big cigar-shaped object just shoot off the north end of Bell Island. And later that day, he heard of the Bell Island boom had happened. So anyways, sometimes it takes people 40 years to report, or 10 years, or sometimes they know right away to go on to MUFON to report it. It's very easy. You fill out a form real quick. You can remain anonymous. So yeah, we're really in an important place. I think very the oldest fossils are here. We're on the coast. We're an island. We used to be part of the Appalachian Mountains, for example. I mean, that could bring you into the whole Wendigo stuff. There's a lot to, and the first Bigfoot sighting was here as well, by Leif Erikson. The Norse in 750 AD was the first reported Bigfoot sighting, and it was in Newfoundland. So
that's very interesting that you just mentioned that, because I interviewed Dr. Judd Burton, and he talked about the giants, and I mentioned Bigfoots, and he said something along the lines where, they could have some sort of history melded together with them. And he had asked me to go and look into the Vikings and them, and it's interesting that you did mention that. Now, for our listeners, what do you say to the people who think these lights are just drones?
I would say, what about 150 years ago when this was happening, or 1,000 years ago?
That's right.
Or, or how are drones breaking physics? I mean, certainly it makes sense to try to debunk things and make sense of things, and I think that's actually a really good scientific approach, is to try to, be like, hey, what could this be? Instead of jumping to that's a UFO. I understand that, and it's very important to have that kind of mindset, that scientific mindset. But to dismiss all of the things without really understanding what you're dismissing, that's just foolish. So I would really encourage people who think that to look up. There's a really great Afghanistan military video. I'll have to send it to you after this, but and it's using night vision. And they shoot these 3 hovering spheres with some sort of surface-to-air missile, and it goes right through them, and they just reform and just keep dripping, and it's just really cool. So anyway, yeah, I would say, maybe some of them are drones, but it's certainly not all of them. It's certainly not close to accounting for all of this. All the amazing things that people see.
That would be interesting to see that video for sure. So for our listeners here on Paranormal NL on Spotify and Paranormal NL on our Facebook page, what would you say to the people listening on who want to report something to MUFON? How do they go about doing that?
Okay, yeah, it's super easy. Pretty much you just go to MUFON.com, you go to track UFOs, I believe, and then it can just say report, it says report UFO, and it will, the first thing it'll say is, like, it'll show you Starlink, and it'll say, if this is what you saw, like, you don't need to go any further, but if it isn't what you saw, proceed, and then you just fill out a quick little questionnaire sort of thing describing what you saw, and someone will contact you within 72 hours by email. You can remain anonymous. The illness isn't going to be made to the public or anything like that. Like, you would have to be part of MUFON to even search, for someone's someone sighting. There's only 52 of us in Canada. But anyway, so yeah, very easy. Just MUFON.com, report a UFO, and it's pretty simple process in that way.
So
I would highly encourage people to do that because it's very important in this science to have this reported, to have these on record for statistics,
So, Sarah, if they want to report a cryptid, maybe you can speak on cryptids. Do they report that to MUFON also?
Oh yeah. Cryptids as well. Things even down to fairies, like things like Bigfoot, Wendigo, even poltergeist activity. That would be under the anomalous category. There's 4 categories. There's close encounter, of course, which is HINEX, or based on HINEX. It's the Valley classification system, so it's the anomalous, flyby, maneuver, and then close encounters. So those 4 things, but absolutely ghosts, orbs, spirits, Bigfoot, Wendigo, those things, it's absolutely reportable. I don't think that people even know, because it's hard enough that people know to report a UFO to MUFON, let alone that they can report
that is
something
true.
like a poltergeist.
Can you explain to the listeners what Wendigo is?
Well, Wendigo is present in many cultures, like the Navajo. I think Wendigo comes from the Navajo, but it's also present in other places, like the Inuit have their own version, and it's sort of like a shapeshifter. They are pretty spooky, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a bit spooked by them myself, and I've had several people report them to me, and I've actually gotten them down to a 10-mile radius out in CBS. So yeah, they're things that people call sometimes like not deer. Like it'll be like it's a deer, but like its legs will be backwards, sort of like very spooky stuff. But and I'm not an expert on the matter, by any means, but I'm very fascinated by that. And it does seem as if Newfoundland does indeed have this. I've had people come to me with stories and who've become my friends just from sharing their stories and us going through that and becoming friends, bonding over I guess the paranormal. But it's in a 10-kilometer radius. I know a guy who he was out hunting and they had built a shelter up in the trees, and this is more of a Bigfoot thing though, and when they came back, it was torn down. It was like all of these big branches were torn down. There was like something like a tornado had gone through it, but there was this little pile of rocks. The pile of rocks there, and anyway, they're indigenous as well, so they really believe that it was Bigfoot.
Or in other words, the Wendigo, like you said, and because you mentioned the Inuit have their own terminology for it.
Yeah. There's a bunch of different names for different tribes, I believe. Excuse me. But the Mi'kmaq as well are part of the colloquial. I think they're colloquium people, and it's because of, I believe it's because of the Appalachian Mountains. Like we used to be a part of the Appalachian Mountains, and we broke off just after things began. Vertebrates started walking upright, so we have this ancient history in this place that, I mean, everyone knows the Appalachian. Like, if you think you hear it, you didn't hear it. There's, they have rules out there because there's really weird things that happen, and I think that we overlook the fact that our history and our land is so tightly tied and is the Appalachians. Like, we are the Appalachians, so we're just as spooky. We're just as spooky.
For sure, we do have a lot of spooky things in Newfoundland and Labrador. Well, Sasha, thank you so much for sharing some of your experiences and your huge amount of knowledge on these topics. We'll have to meet up again and talk again about some more of your topics. There's just so many things to talk about.
Oh, there really is so much to talk about, and I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the things that you taught me today in terms of like that vehicle, the map for the vehicle and stuff. I'm going to have to look into that, and yeah, I look forward to talking to you again.
Yes, thank you so much, Sasha. And for our listeners here on Paranormal NL, if you want to share your experiences on one of our Spotify podcasts, just reach out to us on